back to another video. Today I want to discuss about a funny thing that happened when I went out on track in the go-kart. This was my almost most recent time on track. I do have a story to tell on the most recent time I went out, which was only about 5 days ago. However, I have a bit of a story to tell about that, and I won't do that in this video, otherwise it'll be 10-15 minutes long, so I'll save that for a different video. Essentially, with my second most recent time on track, there was a slightly funny thing that happened, which I have the footage all edited up and ready to show you. But when I went out on track, I'm going to show, not tell, so I'm not going to spoil what happened. But there was a really interesting thing that happened when I went around a particular corner at this racetrack, at this go-kart track at Eastern Creek. I went around this particular corner, and then a really odd thing happened. Something that I definitely wasn't expecting to happen, but it did, and I thought that was going to be game over and it was time to head back home because it was so severe. Normally that's just an instant game over, and now you're on your way home with a disappointed look on your face because the day went bad. So yeah, I will show you, before I go any further, I will show you what happened. So as you saw in that footage, the wheel came off. That is really not something you want to come off of a kart or a car or any sort of vehicle, especially when you're going high speed. The best thing about what happened in terms of the wheel coming off was the fact that it came off at the start of the straight. So I had this entire, probably 150 meter long straight that I could use, that I had all this room, so that I wasn't off the track and into the tyre wall, which was very, very lucky. If that happened at the end of the straight, you might have not really been able to tell from the end of the footage where you could actually see all the way to the end. But there is not much room. After you run out of track and you end up on the grass, there is not a lot of room until you hit the tyre wall. It's like maybe 5 meters, 10 meters at the max. 10 meters the absolute maximum until you hit the tyre wall. So if that wheel had come off at the end of the straight as I was turning into the next corner, I would have gone straight into the tyre wall, no questions asked. So it was really, really good that I went off, that the wheel came off at the start of the straight, because I actually finished about halfway down the straight and I was accelerating into the straight. So I was probably only doing 50 kilometers an hour, maybe 60 at the most. It was enough to make the camera shake. But I mean, it does that all the time anyway, but especially at higher speed. So I wasn't really going that fast, and yet I already covered half the distance of the track, 50, 60 meters of spinning from just that's essentially a meter per kilometer an hour, pretty much, is how much I spent. So I was very, very fortunate that I didn't go into a tyre wall. But yeah, it's pretty wild. I was not expecting that to happen in any way, having a wheel come off. But yeah, I thought that was game over for sure. I thought I was going to have to just get the wheel, get the cart back on the trailer, hook up the trailer to the back of the car, and head home with the most disappointed look on my face. So very lucky that I actually managed to get the wheel back on. Well, my dad and I managed to get the wheel back on, and I managed to go back out on track, which I don't have any footage for because the camera had run out of batteries at that point, unfortunately. But I actually stayed out for an extra 45 minutes to an hour after the wheel came off before going back home. So it actually wasn't a game over, very fortunately. So yeah, that's a little crazy story that happened. Now, the wheel that came off, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the back right. Yes, it was the back right wheel, because it was the wheel that was next to the sprocket and the chain. So the wheel next to the sprocket and chain, which is on the right, so it's the rear right tire, came off. And when I had a look at the axle, the key was also missing. Now, for anyone who knows about karts, you'll know that that's a problem. But for anyone who has no idea what I've been talking about, the key that I've been talking about that sticks a bit above the kart, that's essentially sort of meant to lock things in to make sure they don't come out. Not only is the wheel not supposed to come off because the key's there, the key is most certainly not supposed to come off either. You know how it's actually difficult? Like, I can't get the key out once you put it in. I have to literally get a flatbed screwdriver and pry it like a pry bar and then rip it out and like wiggle it to pull it out. It's like legitimately, it's like a 1.5, 2 minute long process to get one key out. And there's 4 of them on the rear axle. So like there is no reason for that thing to come out. I still have no idea why the key came out, but it's because the key was loose or something. It was because of the key that because the rear tires were so far out on the axle, because I had more width that way at the rear, so I had more grip. Problem is, that means there's less of the key holding the actual wheel onto the axle, or locking it onto the axle. And so because of that, eventually it just decided on that particular part of the track, on that particular lap, even though I'd done several track days prior with no issue at all, it just decided to come off. And to people who don't know much about karts, the next thing I'm going to say may not particularly matter, and that's perfectly fine. But to anyone and everyone who does know about karts and understands everything I've been talking about so far, the wheels, I believe, were 1,400 mil apart, something like that. It was like 1,400 mil, I think. And I remember hearing some piece of information after the wheel came off. I researched it, and there's some piece of information that said about a good amount, like you really don't need to go more than that, is 1,380, so 1,380 millimeters. And my rear tires were at 1,400 millimeters, which kind of explains why they came off. So as soon as I put them back on, I immediately moved them further in. I believe they're about 1,370 now, so when I go out to the track next, I will be bumping them back to 1,380, and we'll see how that goes. So there's a lot more of the key holding it in now. Also, the key was really hard to find. On a grey track with a grey piece of metal, whew, I was very, very lucky I found it. Took us quite a while. Both my dad and I out searching. Took us a long time to find it. But we got it in the end. Got it all back on. Everything works now. I've had another track day since the wheel came off, and that track day went perfectly fine, and that's the track day that I have another story for. But I'll save that for another video. So essentially that's it. The wheel came off my go-kart. As you saw from the video, I went for a bit of a spin. Surprisingly, my neck was completely fine. And I'm saying this like this happened not like recently. It was about probably a week and a half ago. If I had to give a rough day count, it was probably 10 to 12 days ago that this happened. Roughly 10 to 12 days ago is when this wheel came off. And I spent the time from then up till now getting the footage off my camera and then editing it to then come here and film this and then pull it all together and bring it out. So yeah, essentially that spin, no issues with my neck. I was very, very surprised about that. I was really, really expecting my neck to really not be too happy with me. But no, seemed fine. And I certainly know by now, because it's been almost 2 weeks since that track day, I would certainly know by now, and if anything, it would have come and gone by now. Being almost 2 weeks, it would have come and gone well gone by now. And it just never showed up. So yeah, my neck was just fine. From doing, doing almost 2 spins and then doing half a spin back the other way, So yeah, essentially, wheel came off. I did a bit of a spin, and yeah, I went back out in the same session on the same day and did a few more things, and that was all fine. And then I've got another track day to talk about, which I will film a video for at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else to talk about now. So I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.